Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. We are going to be discussing the pre-qualification form as well as the loan status update in regards to how a seller would need to view the information. So this is what a blank form looks like. This form will be filled out by the lender, and they will be submitting it to the buyer's agent, and the buyer agent will in turn submit it with any and all offers that they submit on behalf of their client. So let's just go over this in detail. And at the end, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, so line 1 and line 2, this indicates the form is to be used in conjunction with the contract. Line 3, 4, and 5, this is going to be filled out and signed in the event that the buyer has not consulted with the lender. If the buyer marks the box in line 3, the buyer is to complete 4 and 5. Otherwise, those items or lines will not be filled out. Line 6 is if the lender has spoken with, and then the buyer's name will be here. Line 7 identifies the buyer's marital status. Are they married, unmarried, or legally separated? Line 8 indicates whether or not the buyer is relying on the sale of a property, so it's either yes or no. Line 9 through 11, this indicates whether the buyer is relying on any seller concessions to pay any of the buyer's closing costs, and any amounts contributed by the seller will be stated in the purchase contract on the applicable line. Line 12 indicates whether the buyer is using down payment assistance to qualify for the loan. Line 13 is what type of loan they are going to be using, whether it's conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, or other. Now, this can change through the contract. Once you're under contract, if they decide that they were FHA and now they want to go conventional, they can definitely make that change. However, in the event that you receive this pre-qual up front and then a lender gives you an updated pre-qual or an LSU and this type of loan has changed, they can't just change it without all parties agreeing to it. So just keep your eye on this and make sure that nothing has changed. And if it's a change for the better, meaning it goes from FHA to conventional, usually the seller won't have a problem with that. But if it goes from conventional to FHA, they may have an issue with that. So again, all parties have to agree if there's a change in the loan type. Line 14 indicates whether they, meaning the buyer, intend to occupy the property and what type of occupancy that looks like. Is it their primary, secondary, or is it a non-owner occupied investment property? Line 15 and 16 indicate the type of property. Is it a single family, condo, planned unit development, manufactured home, mobile home, vacant lot, land, or other? And multiple boxes can be checked. This is just stating that these are the types of homes the buyer is looking for. Line 17, the lender indicates whether the buyer has signed the HUD form advising the buyer to get a home inspection. That's typically on FHA loans only, and it does state that right there. Line 18, this indicates if the lender, line 18, the lender indicates whether they had a verbal discussion with the buyer regarding their income and their assets. So obviously this should be checked yes. If it's checked no, well, have you spoken with them? How did they become a client of yours? Whatever it might be, you can definitely ask the lender. Line 19 indicates whether the lender has obtained a copy of their credit report. It's okay if it's checked no, because they still have within 10 days of getting under contract to get all of this stuff updated and checked off. Line 20 the lender indicates the loan amount that the buyer can qualify for. So this is going to be the dollar amount on the first page of the contract. I believe it's line 12 or 13, depending on if they're, putting a large down payment, whatever it might be. Typically, it's going to be line 13, but that states that that amount should match this amount, or this amount should be more than line 13 on the purchase contract. If it's less, I would ask for an updated prequal because this line item determines how much the buyer can get a loan for. Line 21 and 22, this indicates the total principal and interest payment the buyer is qualified for, and also what the buyer's maximum total housing payment can be. So again, that's line 21 and 22. So this is going to include principal, interest, HOA fees, insurance, and it can't exceed this. Line 23, that is the maximum interest rate which the buyer qualifies for. In a volatile market, if rates go up, maybe the buyer won't qualify anymore. So this doesn't have to be the current interest rate. It just has to be what the buyer can qualify for. And then it talks about what kind of interest rate it is. Is it fixed, adjustable? Is there a prepayment penalty? Line 24 through 28. These are the documents that the lender has or has not received or reviewed, or if it doesn't apply. One thing I like to pay special attention to is the gift documentation, because if gift funds are needed, you should be made aware of that in the beginning of the contract before you accept it. In the event that a buyer is getting gift documentation or gift funds and they end up not getting them, and now they don't have enough money to close, a lot of buyers don't understand that just because you don't have enough money to close, that doesn't mean you can cancel and get your money back. Those funds typically would go to the seller, and as always, it's up to title and who gets what based on the written contract. But that is something I would pay special attention to in the beginning, is if gift funds are required or not. And that can definitely change through the process, but nonetheless, not having gift funds when you go to close does not mean they get their deposit back if they end up canceling. Line 29, this is just an additional space for additional comments that the lender might feel is necessary or warranted, or might help you choose their client versus another. Line 30 and 31, so line 30 and 31 provide that the buyer has instructed the lender to provide the LSU form to the seller and the broker within 10 days of the contract, and then upon request thereafter. They are only required to give it to us one time. I would recommend getting it every 10 days and just letting the lender know that you are going to ask for that, and if they could just go ahead and send it to you every 10 days. Or once a week, just so that you can keep updated and keep your seller informed on how the progress of the application is going with the buyer. Line 32 through 34. This is the information that does not constitute loan approval. The information must be approved by the underwriter, and any material change in the buyer's credit or financial profile will nullify the pre-qualification. They have to inform you of any changes immediately. Line 35, this is just the date that this expires. If you're closing after this date has already passed, that's not a good thing, because if the lender has to pre-pull their credit report, maybe they don't qualify now. So just make sure that if this is going to expire before you close on the contract you're under, make sure you get an updated one ASAP. Line 36 through 40. This is the lender's contact information, as well as their license number, their nationwide mortgage licensing system number, and then line 42 is going to be signed by the buyer. If you receive this with an offer and this is not signed, please request them to send a signed copy. Page 2 of the prequal, which I don't have a copy of you for you at this moment, but that is going to be the loan status update. Now that is the information on the loan status, and it's provided in much more detail. It goes through a long list of items that the lender has done, and it checks it off. And it has dates, and I believe it has initials too, from the lender stating that this hasn't been completed and when it was completed. The intent of the LSU is for the seller, the buyer, the real estate agents, and the lender to more effectively determine where the transaction stands in terms of what has been done and what is still needed to be done. Okay, so the LSU, again, is delivered to the seller's agent on day 10 and then upon request. And it is the status of the loan and where it stands at that moment in time. Times of the there are times in the contract as it progresses that you would want to get an updated LSU, and that one particularly is the appraisal and then final approval. So definitely make sure you're in contact with the lender, asking them questions. How's everything going? How's everything looking? Can you give me an LSU? And an LSU is required for your paperless pipeline file. So in the beginning, you get a copy of the prequal. Then later, day 10 or after, you have at least one LSU. And, of course, just like the prequel, that has to be signed and it needs to be uploaded to the paperless pipeline. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's class. If there's any questions that you have, please do not hesitate to reach out to me after the class has ended and let me know what questions you might have. We will be having a class coming up talking about the different loan types. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again so much for coming. Have a great afternoon.